The Old Testament lesson today comes to us from Numbers 21. From Mount Hor, they set out by the way to the Red Sea to go around the land of Edom. But the people, these are the Hebrews who had just been released from captivity in Egypt, the people spoke against God and against Moses. Why have you brought us out of Egypt to die in the wilderness? For there is no food and no water, and we detest this miserable food. Then the Lord sent poisonous serpents among the people, and they bit the people so that many Israelites died. The people came to Moses and said, "We have sinned by speaking against the Lord and against you. Pray to the Lord to take away the serpents from us." So Moses prayed for the people. And the Lord said to Moses, "Make a poisonous serpent and set it on a pole. And everyone who is bitten shall look at it and live." So Moses made a serpent of bronze and put it on a pole, and whenever a serpent bit someone, that person would look at the serpent of bronze and live. So the gospel reading we had from John 3 this morning, that Stephen read for us, contains probably the most familiar passage of Scripture, right? I go back to the days you would watch Monday Night Football, and behind the goalpost was the guy with the T-shirt that said John 3:16, right? Well, we get it in some context today. It's in the midst of a conversation with Nicodemus, who's a Pharisee, who comes to Jesus and has some questions. And so Jesus is trying to answer Nicodemus's question. And then as we kind of get towards the end of the conversation, Jesus uses an image, a biblical image, to describe himself and to help answer Nicodemus's questions. And the image he uses is from Numbers 21, right? He says, Jesus says, "As Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, so may the Son of Man be lifted up," right? So this allusion to Numbers 21. So let's go back to Numbers 21 for a second, right? The people come out of Egypt, right? And they're hungry because they had to leave quickly, right? And so God gives them manna from heaven. And they do what? They complain. Right? We detest this horrible food. Right? And they're complaining. And so then God does what? Sends poisonous serpents in the story to bite them. And then some of them were dying, and then they, "Moses, we have done something wrong. And would you please go to God and tell him to quit the serpent thing? Because it's bugging me. If you've ever, we've seen snakes on a plane and we don't like it." Right? Right? So God says to Moses, easy peasy, lemon squeezy, right? It's, you get one of them serpents, and you put it on a pole. And whoever looks at the serpent, if they get bitten, will be healed. So what does Moses do? Now, right about now, you're probably wondering if I got a snake back here. Because that's within the realm of possibilities now. You know that, right? Right. Answer. Right. Now, I will admit, because I saw the look on your faces. Now, remember, my first congregation was down on the Ohio River, where you were careful when you went into churches you hadn't been in, because there were cages underneath some pews. I was looking to see if you guys were looking under your pews real quick. Right? So Moses puts a snake on a pole. Right? Just like on the picture. And he does what? He goes like this. People! And they turn around and they go, what? And he's just a stand. And if they've been bit by a serpent, they just look at it. And they're healed. That easy. Right? They just look at it. And they're healed. Right? And you can imagine, Moses, somebody got bit by a snake. All right. George! That's how it went down. Jesus says, just as Moses lifted up the snake in the wilderness, so will the Son of Man be lifted up. It's the same way. Jesus is saying, just as Moses lifted the snake up and people would look and be saved, that's all they had to do, so the Son of Man would be lifted up. So that all you had to do was what? Look and be saved. So why does humanity put so many rules on how to be saved? If all we got to do is look. We come up with all kinds of rules. You got to say this, you got to say that, you got to do this, you got to do that, you got to be this, you got to be that, you got to wear this, you got to wear that. No. It's just that easy. Look and be saved. That's what Jesus is saying to Nicodemus at night. Right? Nick, come on. Yes. She's going, come on, preacher, sit down. We know there's snacks after this. Right? We make it way too easy. We put barriers so that we think we can keep people from being saved. Why do we do that? Right? Because Jesus, part of John 3:16 is the answer to Nicodemus' question. Right? God does this so that who may be saved? Who? Who's the who in the answer? What's that? Everyone, the world. God makes it so that the world. God so loved the. So he implements a system so that the world may be saved by the Son of Man being lifted up. It is just that easy. Now, let's get back to the snake. Right? Interesting enough about the snake and this right here. The symbol for the healing profession in our country is what? Caduceus, which is a snake on a pole. Right? There's two different ones. A caduceus is two snakes and wings. That's caduceus, right? If you just look at some symbols, it's this. This is called the rod of Asclepius, which is just one snake on a pole, no wings. Both the same thing. It goes back to this healing story in Numbers 21. That's where it comes from. This notion of being healed by looking at this symbol of healing, ultimate healing. Healing of everything, for everyone, open to everyone, as healing should be. Right? Now, here's the other thing. Okay, side note. I am not a medical professional, never have been in my life. Do not take medical advice from me. Okay? Do not, in any way, shape, or form, think that anything I say should be medical advice. All right. It's my understanding, and the medical professionals among us may tell me different, that in a vaccine, there's a little bit of the thing in it so that you can build immunity. You see, it's the very thing that bites you that saves you. That's Numbers 21, right? God says, go get a snake, the very thing that was biting them, and says, put it on a pole and lift it up. What saves you is what is eating at you. Notice, God didn't do what the people asked them to do. He said, tell God to take the snakes away. Now did God take the snakes away? No, because people would still get bit. God didn't take the snakes away. People were still getting bit. They just had a way to be saved. God still allowed it to happen. The snake. Now, let's go back to last week. We had the snake. That was a symbol of what? Who? Say it. The devil, the tempter. Same image is in play. Same story. Right? It's the temptations we fall into that bite us, that drag us down, that kill us, that we got to look at. We got to come face to face with to be saved. Right? So often the things that we're tempted to, the things that when we fall into temptation, when we listen to the tempter whisper in our ear, right? We keep in the darkness. Nicodemus comes to Jesus at night, in the darkness. He doesn't want people to know he's a follower of Jesus. See, what's about this pole being lifted up? You got to shed light on the stuff that you keep in the darkness if you want to be saved. If you want to be free from the things of temptation that you fall into, you got to bring light to it. You got to lift it up and show it. And you got to look at it. And you got to deal with it. That's what we need to be doing. What's that? Very true. Because when we hide it, and we're really good at hiding it, or think we're good at hiding it, most of us just don't bring it up when we see it because we got our own stuff we're trying to keep to ourselves, you know. We got our own snakes in the closet. But that's how we get through. We got to lift up the stuff that gets to us. Because the truth is, we have an ability to be saved from anything. We shouldn't be afraid. You know, I know that snakes are God's creatures, but I don't need them in my life. Right? But we shouldn't be afraid of the temptations we fall into. They shouldn't bind us and hold us captive. And the power of them is when we keep them in the dark. That's how all that has power. Right? When things are going on and, things are happening in the dark, that's the power. But as soon as you bring light to them, the power is released. Because the fear is that people will find out. But once people know, where's the power in any of it? Nowhere. Right? So what today's message is, this whole thing with the snake on a stick, right, is we got to lean in to beginning to shine light on our darkness, to begin to bring to light all the things that we do in the dark that we don't want people to know. And we need to offer it up, put it on the sticks, and offer it up to God. And as we look at it and deal with it, it frees us. Right? Because remember, in John 3:16, is that God so loved the world. God desires the entire world to be saved. And so now it's upon us to go out into the world, showing the world the lifted up Son of Man. It's on us to lift high the cross. It's upon us to stand in the darkness of the wilderness of this broken world. Maybe imagine that Moses is holding up that arm. I got a bad shoulder. It's that old football injury, right? Yeah, whatever. Right? Moses is holding up that arm for you to say, One came into the world so that you could just look and be saved. And we're the same, just like you. We got stuff that we need to be shown, just like you. And we'll walk through this life together. But all we got to do is focus on the one that's been lifted up. And he'll show us the way out of any situation, of any circumstance. It's just that easy. And God wants God's love to be known to the world. And that love comes through you. Woo.